Coming up on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock podcast.
These were fellas, C-suite, executive, millionaire fellas, you know. Some of them were so stressed and so under so much pressure to just provide and to keep the whole thing afloat that they had lost touch with that young fella inside of themselves. And here we were walking through the desert and they were just grinning. They weren't grinning, they were smiling ear to ear. They were happy. And to feel the innocence of that happiness, I think, is something that we undervalue. And so we complicate things looking for it. And I think it's actually in the simplification that you find it.
To say that Diarmuid Lyng's life story is an unconventional one would be one of the understatements of the year. A star hurler with Wexford who gave it all up to travel across Asia, spending months meditating in a Buddhist temple in Thailand, who returned home to live in the wilds of Kerry and champion Irish culture, language and spiritualism. It has all the hallmarks of a Hollywood movie. Diarmuid has spent a lot of time thinking about his life and his purpose in life, and he's had the courage to make some very difficult decisions in order to stay true to himself and what he believes he's been put on this planet to do. This chat can get quite deep at times, but we also have some great laughs and get stuck into things like the madness of hurling, the beauty of the Irish language, Diarmuid's creative crowdfunding idea for finding a permanent home for his wild Irish family, and more.
There was nobody coming to matches. The great Wexford support, it wasn't there. Now then this figure from the television came in, or this big name came in, and all of a sudden fellas were trying harder. And I was sitting there with a bit of a Roy Keane attitude to it. I was like, but why are you trying harder? Because he's there. What's it to do with him? You're hurling. Why are you not trying to get the maximum out of yourself every single day? There's nothing to do with anybody else. It's just you. We weren't masters of the language by any stretch. I'm sure that they were even looking at what we were doing sometimes saying, come on lads, you can't be running Irish language retreats, you don't know your arse from your elbow in terms of the language. But I don't feel like we were ever doing that.
No.
What we were doing was we were instilling the potential for the falling in love with the language again, and that's what we were most effective at, living it out in the wild. We had 2 tents, 1 tent for food, 1 tent for sleeping and doing the practices, and we had a fire, and over the road there was a kind of a coliseum place where we played a bit of hurling and did a bit of wrestling. And
I love the way you throw in that, a bit of hurling and a bit of wrestling.
Yeah, a bit of hurling, a bit of wrestling. And I know that some of this might sound batshit crazy to people, but I can only say that I would thought it was too, until I saw the effects of it. And I saw the things that would change in my life, the graduations that would be made, you know, where things would line up again.
My full chat with Diarmuid Lyng coming right up after this. And listen, folks, all we've been talking about all week is tariffs, markets, Trump, China, penguins. I don't know. Listen, it's time to go off to the races. It's the what the hell is going on in the world markets handicap hurdle. Nobody knows how this one's going to go. Number 1, stability, is a non-runner. They're under starters orders, and they're off in the what the hell is going on in the world markets handicap hurdle. And first to show is Trump tariffs. Trump tariffs being followed closely now by counter tariffs. Trump tariffs comes back on the inside and counter tariffs immediately responds. Trump tariffs, counter tariffs, Trump tariffs. 0 by 0 trying to get into it there. NASDAQ having a little look. Trade war looks menacing on the outside here, and it's counter tariffs followed by Trump tariffs, who's now gone out in front again. Trump tariffs 0 by 0. NASDAQ. Bond markets coming under pressure now. Bond markets under pressure, and consumer sentiment is gone. Consumer sentiment a faller at that, and Trump tariffs, counter tariffs, bond markets are all over the place and coming over to the next. NASDAQ falls. NASDAQ is gone, and the markets have come crashing down there through the fence as well, and Dow Jones is down. Dow Jones is a faller. NASDAQ is gone, Dow Jones is gone. Trump tariffs, counter tariffs, and here comes recession lad. Recession lad. Trump tariff, recession lad takes it. Recession lad takes it. And it looks like we've all been taken for a ride on that one. And I love it when we go racing. And of course, exclusive comedy on the Mario Rosenstock podcast every week. Now it's time for a mention from my special sponsor, my great sponsor, deluxebathrooms.ie, Ireland's premium bathroom and tile retailer. Get that bathroom you've been dreaming of. You'll find them in Dundalk Retail Park and Little Island in Cork, or online at deluxebathrooms.ie. And right now, they have a special deluxe bathroom Easter extravaganza sale, which is now on, and you can save up to 65%. 65% off luxury bathrooms and premium tiles between now and Sunday, 27th of April at midnight. And Deluxe Bathrooms have an amazing spend and save offer where you will save, for example, an extra €100 for the first 1,500 spent, €200 for 2,000, €300 for 3,000, etc., etc. On it goes, and there is no limit. So get yourselves down to Deluxe Bathrooms. It sounds like a great offer, and thanks to the guys for getting involved in not only podcasting but my podcast. And you've been a great supporter so far. Okay. If you're a GAA fan, you'll probably be very familiar with Diarmuid Lyng. He was a fantastic hurler who captained the Wexford senior team before retiring and becoming a well-known pundit. And so it was that we started with.
So Diarmuid, you were saying just a minute ago there that hurling was the one thing in your life you had mastered.
Yeah.
And
I didn't master, like the game is ever changing, so you can't master the dynamics of the game, but and there's an element of mastery that can come to life in your body where you just, and as you had said as well, it's now an ability to be able to break it down into very, very simple and digestible pieces. Other people who love the game, like the likes of Caoimhín O'Reilly loves to play hurling. I love, we used to go to the park in Dublin when I was living in Dublin and play a bit of hurling and play little games. And Liam O'Mainley, we had playing a game last year. These fellas who love the game.
Yes.
But I think one of the things that happens in GA clubs is that you might be a little bit, you might come in wearing red shoes, or you might come in wearing different jeans than everybody else, and so they're like, who's your man there? Some artist or something. And it's not a particularly enjoyable experience for them. And so they love the game, but they can't find a place in society to play it because the GA club doesn't seem to want them.
That's interesting. So you're saying that even in the world, the fraternity of hurling, that there's a conformity expected.
Oh yeah.
There's
conformity in the dressing room. There's of male culture.
Are you saying there's less room for? Are you saying then by definition or by extension that there is less room for the flamboyant, less room for the one that stands out, less room for the one of a different colour? I don't mean that in racial terms. I mean that in metaphorical terms.
Yeah,
the colourful one.
I think it's funny. We've gone both directions simultaneously to a degree because we are more accepting of it and more because we kind of have to be, because in case there might be a racial element to it, or there might be some everybody has to be welcome and every aspect of everybody has to be welcome, because I don't want us to be seen to be not welcoming. So that's there, and so there's a kind of a...
But what about talent? What about somebody who's obviously
So
individually
this is the other
talented?
side of the game, and this is where I would say, Johnny, do you remember Johnny Pilkington? He played for Offaly in the 90s.
I do, yeah.
Absolute tear away. You couldn't grasp the man. He was on the field. He was just it was a force of nature, and you just had to give Johnny Pilkington the ball and let him do the rest. That was the way it was, But I don't think he'd make a panel now, because he wouldn't conform to the contract that's set down at the start of the year. He wouldn't wear the same clothes as everybody else. He wouldn't do that because he wasn't him. He was a different. Now I don't know enough about Johnny Pilkington to say that's absolutely 100% true of the man, but there's this, I can see that energy force in the game where there's less space because it's so total and so you have to be a trainer, you have to do this, you have to sign these contracts, you're not allowed to drink, you're not allowed to do this, you just this control of your life. And some fellas who generally the free spirits are like, hang on a second, that's who I am. I thought that's why I played the game.
Well, you raise a very interesting point. I mean, we throughout the season in Ireland, the hurling season, the GAA season, and because we've got so many outlets now, as I mentioned to you, I've often enjoyed your appearances on Off the Ball, and the Sunday Game and the radio here and the TV and the GAA Go and everything, right? So we hear the papers then and Brolly and everybody, and so we hear opinions everywhere. But this is actually the first time I've heard about gambling in GAA, the chronic epidemic that is gambling, and young men being on their own, and these fit young men not knowing what to do with their time and getting hooked into gambling. Yeah. But one of I've never heard this discussed before, this idea of the interesting character, the interesting, flamboyant, maybe talented character being slightly not welcomed to the group because they're not driven by process and conformity. Yeah. That's an interesting one.
Well, as those processes and as more and more people come into the GA, management teams now, like they used to be when I started off, there was 4, you had your manager and your 3 selectors, and if you're lucky you might get to see a dietitian every now and then, but that was the extent of it. Now there's teams of 30, and I feel sometimes that they come in with their own, maybe they're athletes maybe they're long distance runners, so you might get some kind of running coach in, and you might get somebody else who's a boxing coach, and he might come in, and they all bring in their, like, even in a very basic level, they bring in their individualistic sport and individualistic mindset to their game. Like, if you're playing any of those sports, it's just you in control, there's nobody else. So we're all drawn to the chaos of a hurling match. Like, it's 30 people, like, it's mayhem. There's all kinds of things happening all the time, and we revel in that.
Yeah.
So when somebody comes in and says,
this can be controlled
if you just do these things, I'm like, I don't know if you've seen, or I don't know if you've seen this game, or I don't know if you know this game as well as you think you do. I know you think it worked for you, or it worked for your sport, but in this sport, I think those characters, if we don't have those characters, I don't think the young fellas who are looking at it have this space to dream and say, whoa, it can be that. I can be, that's possible for me, as opposed to, I have the ball and I'm, what do I do? And it's all in the head, and I sometimes I feel like the heart of the game is where the cost is.
Yes.
And even mentioning, it's interesting, and I've just had this feeling myself over the last while, like on discussions like that about gambling and the addictions and stuff in it. It might be laying too much on the door of some of those people who come into the game with their structure and their systems, but I find that the value of sport should be to nourish a part of you that otherwise is not, maybe you can't get, it won't be nourished, but there's the sense of serious play. There's play, like that's what it is. It's play. We think it's real serious, and it is real serious, but it's also play.
It is, and it nurtures creativity as well.
It does all of those things, and if those things aren't getting nurtured, I'm not surprised to hear that there are people with serious addiction issues in the game. Because if you're not nourished by your sport, the thing you're choosing to give all of your time to,
you're going to break out.
If it's not nourishing your heart,
you're going to seek.
Like, I think that's one of the areas that addiction revels, is when you're not getting met in your experience of yourself. Now, there's trauma from the past, that's a separate issue, but if you're being nourished by your game, I think that you're not. Like, as you know, John Moriarty used to talk about, is your society nourishing you or is it vampiring you?
Yes.
And if you're being vampired, that's like, that's hard to get over that, you know?
Okay.
Now, look, we're in heavy territory.
Oh no, we are now, and I'll steer you back now from that for a minute, Diarmuid.
I don't want to. No, just it's also great.
Yeah, I get it. I get it. But so you were very, very committed. You were captain, weren't you, of the squad for 2 years? Of Wexford, and you were completely committed to your course. You were probably obsessive about the game.
For sure.
You were physically highly conditioned. You would have been a kind of, I suppose, in almost the Roy Keane sort of studious sort of attention to detail with your physical conditioning and stuff like that.
To a degree, not to his extent, but yeah.
Well, you know, that kind of thing where you put it. It's really religious almost.
Yeah. I didn't have he would have had, I think, that like total and utter drivenness that we see in Roy Keane.
Yeah.
You can see it when he talks about the game. I was definitely a little bit more attracted to the free spirit nature of it, and the creativity of it, and the unfolding moment of it. I really enjoyed that part.
But it's clear, though, from what we've just talked about a minute ago, that and from all the public appearances that you've made and that I've watched you on, that maybe you represent that free spirit that we've been talking about a minute ago, and that maybe that free spirit was maybe not going to be, that kind of free spirit, as you kind of intimated, was not going to be really tolerated by the 30 strength management team that might come along and have a look at squads these days. So did you feel that Diarmuid Lyng now in 2025 probably wouldn't last as long as he did back then?
No, because what happens is your athletic identity kind of gets held. A manager or a coach knows that you have this burning desire, and so they put down things in front of you to say, if you do this, this and this, then we're going to get along fine, and you're going to get along fine. And I wanted to play hurling for Wexford. I wanted to be the best hurler in Wexford, and I wanted to achieve whatever I could. I wanted to emulate the heroes that I had when I was younger, George O'Connor's or whoever it was. You know, I wanted to emulate those characters, and so whatever they said, I'd have done. I mean, there's no question about it. What I look back on now and kind of lament to a degree, and so that's why I try and bring some of these ideas into the game now, is that that's not, in terms of the individuation process that human beings must go on, the interdependence that we must assume at some stage in our lives. We can't stay in this little independent way of thinking. You know, everybody has to have one of everything and you just depend on yourself. I mean, that's a totally erroneous way to go about it. You have to graduate into interdependence, and so we're dependent on each other. And in an environment where you're dependent on each other, in this context, I want you to be as full in your interview and as fully present as possible, and that's going to bring out the best in me, and vice versa. The same situation there is, I think, if people are using your desire to achieve their ends at the long-term cost of you, that's problematic, and that's happening. And I just don't appreciate it, because I think one of the things that Brian Cody really brought to the game, to my mind, was this idea that also outside of all of that story about the pizzazz and the razzmatazz and all of this stuff around the game and the physical preparation, the coaches and all that, is the game. The game of hurling exists independent of the GAA. The game of hurling exists independent of all of that noise. And you have to remain true to some of the principles of that game, but you have to understand that it is independent first to be able to do that. And that's what that Kilkenny team did. That's why they were so successful. He drilled into them, I think, from a very early stage. You have to be honest with the game. And everybody in his interviews, it was hilarious after in his interviews, he'd use words like genuineness. You have to be genuine with the game. And people would be like, because we were in that period where it was like, oh, this is the most successful coach of all time, and there's all of these coaching techniques and tactics, and what are you doing, Brian? How are you doing? How are you getting the best out of these fellas? And he was giving it all away in the interviews. And there's like, no, you're treating us like it's too simple. He's like, no, it's not too simple. It is simple. You have to be integral in your relationship with the game. And when you are integral, and I know it from the days that I played in that integrity, and you'll know it too, like from in your performance and stuff, like when you're really in it, outside conditions and forces start to play with you. They start to augment what it is you're doing. When you're kind of closed off a little bit or in your own fear, you don't read the world around you coming in. Whereas when you're really true to the game and when you're playing it with that kind of sincere passion, the game starts to respond. Like the ball will just flick up into your hand. Or I played last year in the over 40s, and I remember just sitting into this lovely place in myself where I was just observing everything unfolding in front of me. I was like, oh, look, he thinks he's going to get it. It's going to miss his hurl by an inch. It's coming into my hand. This is hilarious. Like it was just such, I was like, oh, this is it. I'm jamming with nature here. I'm jamming with the whole thing. I'm not just playing my game.
You're hearkening back to a thing I remember hearing it first in the 80s, where Martina Navratilova actually coined it in tennis, and she coined the most commonly used expression. She's talked about being in the zone, which everybody talks about now. And they asked her, what is this in the zone thing? And they said, well, in the zone is when everything slows down.
Yeah.
And you think that the ball is the size of a football, that you can hit it anytime you want, when you want, and you're moving in slow motion. And really, it's almost like that thing in The Matrix where the bullets are going really slow and you can just catch them when you want. And that's being in the zone, which is what we use the word present. But I think what you were describing with Brian Cody is this thing, that a mantra that people now use, which obviously he was being genuine, was they often say it now in rugby as well, which is honesty. Yeah. Honesty as well, No, but and they are onto something. They are onto something.
There's no doubt about it. I've just seen it in so many dressing rooms and heard it from so many managers. It's up on the wall, like honesty is up on the wall. I'm like, well, look, we're going to need a couple of weeks before we start training to discuss that word. Because there's what do you mean by honesty?
Exactly. Yeah.
That means totally different things for everybody.
Of course it does.
Is it honesty of effort?
Yeah.
Is it honesty
to
with each other?
Mistakes.
In to say? Is it honesty with yourself?
Yeah.
What are you talking about there? But they put it up on the wall as though
I know
they heard it from some coach.
Yeah,
and
it's a very complex word.
And it's worthy of our time to say, like, what is it and how are we going to follow it?
We're still talking about your hurling career, right? So when we talk about being in the moment, or even now moving on to subjects of being in that sense where you feel really kind of like you're jamming, as you say, with everything around you and at home and at one with the game. One person I maybe don't associate that with that is someone like Davy Fitz, in a funny way. And I was wondering, did you work with him, or because he came to Wexford? It was a bit later, was it?
It was after my time. And I don't know what his bag.
You probably would have been punditing on him, though. Would you?
I would, and I certainly feel I mean, it felt clear to me to observe that there was a trench warfare aspect. They're saying this about us, and they're doing this, and them fellas up in Crow Park. That attitude seemed to be always there. This like maybe
and trench warfare, even with the interviewer and with the interviewer.
I won't be saying that to you now.
You know, it's Davy, how do you feel?
I won't be telling you now how I feel now, so I won't. Why do you want to know how I feel? You're not asking me how I feel now, but really what you want to do is you want to go to war with me, and I'll go to war with you if you want, and I'll tell you when I'm going to war.
And then suddenly you're there. I didn't want to escalate it this much.
I was just asking a question, man. Yeah. I think in that situation, there's definitely a danger of slipping into, this is what I want, this is what I need to get, I'm going to use these techniques to get it, and you're going to come with me. And in the bubble of that, it's very attractive, because it can go somewhere. Like when Davy Fitz came to Wexford, thousands of people started going to training sessions and matches again, and everyone started championing, the Wexford sport. Now I had played the previous 2, 3, 4 years where Wexford were on their knees. There was nobody coming to matches. The great Wexford sport, it wasn't there. Now then this figure from the television came in, or this big name came in, and all of a sudden fellas were trying harder, and I was sitting there I suppose with a bit of a Roy Keane attitude to it. I was like, but why are you trying harder because he's there? What's it to do with him? You're hurling. Why are you not trying to get the maximum out of yourself every single day? There's nothing to do with anybody else, it's just you. So it kind of, in the bubble of it, as I said, I see the attraction of it, I see the effectiveness of it. Wexford, like he rose, Wexford, like all tides rose in Wexford when Davy Fitz came in. It was exceptionally effective. But in the long term, I don't think it's good for players.
And perhaps not even the team, because isn't there an element? I mean, he's been through it enough now. And this is with all the best respect to Davy. But he's been through it enough cycles now for us almost to spot a trend. And that is, you come in, you make an immediate impact.
Yeah.
You develop a trench warfare. People go to war for you.
Yeah.
They have success at the beginning. And then you've kind of taken your warfare and your paranoia levels to the limit within the internal bubble. And there's nowhere else for them to go except slightly down.
Yeah.
And it starts tailing off. And that period can last anywhere between 1.5 and 3 years. Reminds me of somebody else, Jose Mourinho.
Yeah.
Who does the same thing. He comes in, it's us against them. We're the greatest team in the world. You should have been fantastic. You used to be fantastic, Diarmuid Lyng. You used to be fantastic. But now you're not fantastic anymore. But with me, you will be fantastic again. So basically, Jesus comes along. He says, you used to be the chosen one. Then you were cast out. Who can regain you? Jesus.
Yeah.
I will raise you from the dead. And then we will go to heaven together. But what happens is...
What a vision.
It works for a while.
So tantalising.
It's so tantalising. It works for a while, and Jesus is with you. And when you look as good as Jose Mourinho in a coat, you go like, I'm going with this guy.
Yeah.
And, you know, especially when he holds my face and kisses me and says, you're the greatest player in the world. Or the famous story when Frank Lampard came out of the shower naked, and there was 26 players sitting with Jose. Frank Lampard came out to the shower naked. He got a bit embarrassed, and Jose just looked at him up and down and went, you're looking at the greatest midfielder in the world. You're man, like you're feeling like Lampard, you know. So there's that. So let me, because I don't want to spend the whole interview talking about this, because there's so many other interesting aspects to your life. But you left hurling at what age?
28. I left for 1.5 years, and I went travelling, and then I came back and I played for a year, and I kind of realised my body wasn't really able for it anymore, so I left in it, but 30 I suppose, 2012. But I left in 2010 initially, and did 1.5 years of travelling around the world. And
when you say travelling around the world, was that Tibet and everything like that?
Yeah.
So that's a very not an unusual, but that's a very distinct travel path. I mean, I had an uncle who did that as well.
Yeah.
And there's a difference between that and going to LA and going to New York. I mean,
or doing the thing that pretty much, you know, everybody who went travelling did, which was they went via Cambodia, they went tubing in Laos, and they went to the Koh San Road in Bangkok, and then they went on to Australia, and they went to an Irish pub for a year, and then they went home through LA, New York, and then home, and then they were like, God, this shithole, we're back in Ireland again. I was like, yeah, but she never left. You just went on the round trip that everybody did, and you went to an Irish bar for what do you expect? Like, you never. So I suppose I can say that.
But you did leave
non-judgmentally, because I would have done the very same thing. And I went to New York and I worked in a bar and I saved up a lot of money, and I was about to go to Australia and go play hurling, and I'd have ended up on that same track. And when I was in New York, I met this Chilean fella, and I was going through a real tough time in my life at the time, and he was this monkish presence. I was like, who is this fella? And I was chatting to him. I used to go on a Wednesday night. I was working in a bar, and I used to go on a Wednesday night and play soccer with all the kitchen staff, all these Mexicans who were about 5'6", and I was this one big tall white fella in the middle of all of them, and then this Chilean fella. And I got chatting to him, and he's like, yeah, it seems like there's something up with you. And I was like, yeah, I'm really struggling with something. And I was kind of, he's like, and he started talking about presence, awareness, meditation, Buddhism, these things. And I was like, I'd never heard of Buddhism. To me, was like eating monkey brains. I don't know what. I just had no clue about what he was talking about. But I knew enough to know that I was on the wrong track, whatever I was doing. And he was heading to Thailand, up into the countryside, to a Buddhist retreat centre to practice, to meditate, to do whatever he was going to do. So I changed my flights from Australia to Thailand, and I went with him, and I spent about 9 months on the road with him. And it wasn't travel. It's not travel. Places are places, there's majestic places, and there's beautiful places, and there's shitholes, there's just travel is travel. But we were getting up at 6:30 in the morning, we were meditating in Chengdu. We were going down with there's just old people on the street doing Tai Chi, and with swords and stuff, and we'd bring the hurls down and we'd step in with them and we'd start doing the Tai Chi, and by the end of the week they'd be teaching us the Tai Chi on the street. It was gorgeous, like. And so it was the quality of how we were living, I suppose. We were eating very well. We were spending time on Qigong, Tai Chi, meditation. We were going to temples, whatever. And then we'd be reading books on permaculture, philosophy, psychology, education, whatever. And we were just discussing them back and forth. And we spent 9 months doing that. I mean, how couldn't you just be improved by an experience like that, But I was plucked from what would have been a very normal experience to a very abnormal experience, and it was the saving of me,
What was wrong with you?
At the end of my hurling career, at 28, I went into, or when I was a little bit younger, I went into the cryotherapy chamber in Wexford, and I went in now, the cryotherapy is, maybe it's effective for other people, but for me it just froze my system, I was maybe low at the time. After we played Kilkenny in the Leinster final, I went to the cryotherapy chamber, stayed in for 5 minutes, stayed in too long, and then something froze my body. I couldn't hold down food, couldn't eat, couldn't drink, I was really wrecked. And so I was teaching at the time, and all I would do was get up, teach, go home, go to bed, get up, go train, and go home, go to bed. Like, I was on 20, 30, possibly 40% of what my energy had been the day before. It was really, and that lasted for about 3 years, 2 years of which I was captain in Wexford, really struggling, and I was still going. I had learned the mechanics of the game well enough to be able to still play it while on working off zero. So I was.
But it had but something fundamentally happened to your
person. Like to my
physically and emotionally.
Well, I suppose physically it starts with, and many people I would say would resonate with many people, is that something happens physically. And it's generally a point in the body. Sometimes it's just a point in the body that will tell you, okay, you're carrying too much with your shoulders or your back or whatever. It's an indicator. Yeah. For me, it was a total destruction, and it was a total destruction of the ego of having been an inter-county hurler and trading on that, and always wanting to talk about it, and always wanting
your
to
identity was stripped.
Identity was totally and utterly stripped, and so I took that time, and I knew I had to heal, and that was the only way I could do it, because they were giving me. I was going to the doctors.
But you were incredibly lucky then to meet this man.
Oh my God!
This man set you on a course whereby your whole life was sliding doors moment in this instance.
For sure.
If you didn't meet Chilean guy, what's his name?
Sergio.
If you didn't meet Sergio, your life may have taken a completely different. There was no real reason why you would have sought out spirituality, meditation, or Buddhism even. No
clue in the world. As I said, like, that was the extent of what I knew about Buddhism. I thought there was something to do with eating monkey brains. I don't know where that came in, or I saw an article somewhere, but that was the extent. I was ignorant, totally and utterly. And then I ended up sitting in a meditation centre or a temple in the mountains in Thailand, and all of a sudden, and I've been stretching and training for 15 years, and I'm sitting there, my knees are up here, and Sergio's in the lowest position, he's just like flat, not a bother. My hips, Irish hips, are closed, and I can't sit properly even, so it's a real, Oh my God! Like, and every day was like, what is going on? Like, what's happening here? And I just kept going. He was kind of guiding me through it a lot of the time as well. But stuff was starting to clear, and I was starting to see things an awful lot clearer, and I could distance myself. Like, even that, I remember being in chatting to this lovely Buddhist monk, and he asked me a question, and I started speaking to him, and I just, like, the man, a little bit like you are now, like, fully was in. He was so fully in that I could feel the cadence of my language changing and improving, and my articulation was an awful lot better, and I felt, fuck it, what he's doing is actually impacting. Like, the level of his listening is impacting my speech.
Right.
Like, I was like, what is going on? And he was saying, we don't need to bring Buddhism home. Like, bring whatever you bring home to your people. Like, if it's Christianity or whatever it is, but like, just bring whatever wisdom you get on this journey back with you. And I suppose I had anything to do with spirituality, to my mind, was religion in the church. And religion in the church was all about, there's only one God, there's only one religion, there's only one church. We're it, we have it, you have to come here to get it, don't mind anybody else. Whereas he was coming from a spiritual background, but he was saying, yeah, whatever you pick up here, yeah, bring it with you and use it. If you think it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. That's fine. Like, there's no ownership of it, And so I really appreciated that point of view, like, that it wasn't he wasn't dictating what I should or shouldn't do. He was like, what you need to do is still yourself for long enough to listen to the voice inside yourself. And that was a revolutionary idea for me. Up to that point, it was like, this is my reaction. Mario said this. Oh, that's great. Oh, yeah, I like that. And I didn't realise that you could. He was like, no, take a step back and observe your reaction. Like, you can do that. Great news. That's great, because up to now I've just been reacting and responding to life, as opposed to okay, so that's me responding to that because of some old trigger from some other past moment, whatever. I see what that moment was now. It's much clearer. Cool. I don't need to be owned by it anymore, and I'm free to respond to whatever I want to respond. Like, it's great news. It was just great news. And so, yeah, it was stuff like that was it helped, and I wondered why, and that's why maybe I have a bit of a hostile view sometimes towards the hurling, which, fundamentally I don't have, but sometimes with the coaches and stuff, I'm like, why aren't you telling the lads what they need to know? You're positing yourself as some kind of expert, but you're not even getting the base level right. The base level is that there's something here, you can be in it. It's a place of great creativity, a place of great relaxation, and it brings you into the zone quicker than anything else. But you're all teaching everything at the surface, and I read sports psychologists telling us they could measure the mind and they could control the mind. Like, you can't. Stop telling people that you can't.
In a way, hurling, the game is a manifestation of the chaos of life that we all experience.
Yeah, man.
But it is because life is random, chaotic, loud, noisy, meaningless, structureless, wild. And occasionally difficult to explain, which are adjectives that explain hurling. People who watch it frequently go, what the hell is going on?
Yeah.
Right? People who know it know what's going on. But a breaking ball, for example, is impossible to predict.
Yeah.
And it's your reaction or ability to step back for that reaction, be with that spirit, be with the spirit of the game, which determines, which is what you're talking about.
Well, what I would say now, like, if I work with a team, I bring teams out for camps, overnight camps, and I bring them playing hurling, and then we go out and we camp out by the fire, and we could bring a couple of cans and have a session around the fire, sing songs, whatever, and I do a few practices with them, a bit of meditation, a bit of yoga, whatever. And one of the things I'm saying to is, like, can you get to the stage where you welcome everything that happens? So Mario's dropped the ball. I said, Mario's always dropping the ball. And this story comes up in your head. I say, now we're not going to be able to do the thing we needed to do because Mario dropped the ball. It's like, no. Mario dropped the ball. That set off this particular set of events. And that actually is the thing that made the goal happen 5 minutes later. You have to welcome everything. And I think that's where the similarities with life really are. Like, if you can get to the stage where you like, oh, I don't have that, or she did that, he did that. You're like in your reactions. It's like your reactions are not guiding you.
Diarmuid, you went through a period of maybe figuring out what was wrong with you. You met this.
Yeah. Exhaustive process of finding.
You met Sergio. You went travelling. You came back to Ireland. You were clearer in your head.
Yeah.
You then became a teacher and a pundit.
I'd already been a teacher, and I kind of went back to it.
Went back
for a short
to
time.
Teaching and a pundit.
And
then you got off that. You stepped off that track again.
Yeah.
And you went to live in Kerry.
Yeah.
And when you went to live in Kerry, you didn't have a job, really.
No.
You were kind of on the breadline. And when
Beneath
I mean on the breadline,
Well beneath it.
well beneath the breadline.
Well beneath the bread.
So you were living as tell me your lifestyle, your living style, your lifestyle. And when you were living in Kerry, so you left your job, you stepped off. In a sense, you stepped off the rat race, right?
Well, I had to, Mario. I had to.
Why?
I had to because I wasn't being. I'd uncovered a lot. For sure I had uncovered a lot on that journey, but the integration of that hadn't happened. And I came home on a Tuesday morning from travelling, and I was training with Wexford hurlers on Tuesday night. Like, I went straight back into it. And the integration process, I didn't understand the integration process. I didn't know you had to do it. I thought, oh, I know that now because it happened and I know it. But the integration process is a very different process. Like, it has to filter down through the different levels over a long period of time, and you have to do that. And I needed to surround myself with, like, what in the East they would refer to as a Sangha, which is people who are aware of that kind of journey, who've been on it before themselves or they've read about it. I don't know. Like, so I went back into the pub for the first time a week later, and the lads, I had been on this year-long journey, and it's like, oh, how did the trip go? Did you see Wexford got better the weekend? And in the millisecond between those two questions was my journey in their eyes. I was like, hang on a second, like, I was battling with the great forces on that journey, and that's all that's afforded. And so if I stayed in that couldn't take place. And so I became what I would term dishonest in terms of, like, reflecting the internal experience I was fitting in again. I was back in the old environment, and it wasn't really, it was a dishonesty that I couldn't live with.
Square peg, round hole kind of.
So I went off. I just went down to West Kerry. I was born in Tralee, and my father had always brought us down to West Kerry, and we had a real love for the place. And Cumminall Beach down there was a place that always kind of drew me in, and I felt could kind of hold me for a little while. And so I got a house in Ballacalla in West Kerry, and I'd no car, I had a phone, there was no reception, I had a laptop, and I had myself, and that was it. And so I was, making wheatgrass and growing sprouts, and I was going off and I was collecting seaweed off the rocks in the morning, and I was swimming in the sea, and I was doing all of that stuff.
For those who don't know what you look like, right? There's a touch of, obviously, Tom Hanks in Castaway, the second half of the movie. Yeah, about you. Fire, right?
Yeah,
because you have the long beard. And you have a really good full head of hair, so that's what the listeners are.
Yeah. That was, and before that, I was very clean cut, and I was always shaved and had kept short hair and was always styled and everything else. But
and you're very, very slim
at that time. Yeah. Well, that's just always been the way. But at that stage, I subletted the house, kind of. I was running a little bit of Airbnb, like people would come and stay in the house while I was staying there, and I was having lovely conversations with them and stuff. But I remember looking back over the year, I got the accounts at the end of the year, and it was $4,500 I'd made, and the rent I paid in that time was $4,500, and I was just like breaking even in that way, just so I could have the time. Now, a friend of mine came to me at the time who was a facilitator with the Reach Foundation, which Jim Stein set up in Melbourne, the former Dublin footballer, and he had an incredible organisation. Like, Jim Stein's an absolute legend in Australia, like hero of a man. And one of his right hand men, Tom Harkin, was over, and we had a good relationship. He came out to me. I was living on the Blasket Islands for a little while, doing a bit of work out there, and he came out with his dad, and we brought him out fishing, and gutted fish and cut seaweed and took mussels off the rocks and fed him up a lovely wild dish. And it was an incredible, like a really incredible time. It was really filled with an awful lot of beauty. But Tom was like, "Look, I don't know, man. It's too wild. There's no fences here, and maybe you need a little bit of a corralling, like, just to make sense of it." Now, from my people back in Wexford, they were like, or even in the organisation I was with up here in Dublin, they were like, maybe you're going a bit too far. Like, they were a bit worried, I would say, But Tom was like, look, you're on the right track, but this is too expansive. If you come to Australia in the wintertime, my parents live beside an ashram, and you can go, I'll bring you to a woman who'll look at your bloods. You can stay in the ashram for the same amount it'll cost you to heat your house for the winter. And so I thought, it sounds like a good idea, so I did that. And I went there for 3 months, and was taking probably €500 worth of supplements a week, and living in this ashram and practicing every day. And there was one particular practice called Yoga Nidra. And Yoga Nidra, for people who don't know, is this guided practice of relaxing your muscles in your body one by one. So you start with the thumb, first finger, second finger, hold the thumb in your mind's eye, relax the muscles of the thumb. Now, when have you ever thought about relaxing the muscles in your thumb? When have you ever relaxed your stomach, relaxed your forehead? Like, you don't consciously do these things.
Since you talk to them, each one of them?
So somebody's guiding it.
Okay.
You're holding, your eyes are closed, you're lying down, you're totally and utterly relaxing into the floor, and you're like, okay. And my body was suffering the effects of excessive stress. Like, it was just stressed out of its mind from this time of like overdoing it, And so I found myself really drawn to that particular practice above everything else, because it was the first thing that was really, I felt it was healing my body, like was letting go of the stress. It was like just relaxing it. And so I picked up practices like that I found to be exceptionally valuable, not just for me, but for other athletes, for high performers, for businessmen, like just a way. They say it's like 4 hours sleep in 22 minutes. And who couldn't do with 4 hours more sleep sometimes, And there's loads of practices online to follow. You just find your teacher and put it on. You just lie back and relax the body. It's so beneficial.
And what is it called?
Yoga Nidra. So
How do you spell that?
Nidra.
Yeah. Yoga Nidra.
Yeah. And so I went down and I did that, and I found there was I got a lot of heat. Like, my body began to strengthen again for the first time, and I began to the head wasn't, you see, that's the thing, you get a physical ailment of any kind, the first thing to go next is the head, because the head is like, what's wrong? What's wrong? And then you might answer that question, and then a minute later you're like, but what's wrong? Because it's constantly there. Whatever your ailment is constantly reminding you there's something wrong. And then your head is like, oh, there's something wrong. There is something wrong, because you've convinced yourself, you know?
Yes.
So this, finally, I kind of could turn the corner and say, oh, okay, it's not so bad. It's not so bad.
Okay.
And that was a relief for
a turning point again.
A turning point, yeah.
All right. Tell me and everybody about wilderness retreats. What are they? Why did you start it? And what are they?
Well, when I went back to West Kerry, after being in Australia, a woman came in my door. A beautiful poet came in my door, and I was thinking at the time, well, it's coming into the winter now, and it'd be nice if there was a woman to keep me warm for the winter. I wasn't really thinking too far in advance. I didn't think I was very much available anyway, because I was still trying to work stuff out, But it turned out
you felt you were a bit disconnected from.
Yeah. Like, because I had been I had been in some beautiful relationships with very beautiful women, and I could say that I loved them, but like, I wasn't sure if I was being really true in terms of my full feeling of what maybe love is. I wasn't sure. The love of another person, how deep does that go, And so we were off, myself and Siobhan, on the rocks in this Gurtna Shiog, I think it's called, the Field of the Fairies, looking out over the Blasket Islands, and we were just jumping from rock to rock, and she was blowing my mind with some of the stuff she was saying and talking about, stuff I'd never heard of before, and all kinds of incredible philosophies from all over the world, and it was lovely. She's a real rich character, and it just bursted out in my heart, like, I felt, oh wow, I felt love, I felt it in my bones, I felt it. So I was totally enthralled, and fell in love, and we had a child, and then we decided, when I was on the Blasket Islands, I was thinking, this is a medicinal place. I'd love to bring, there was people coming out to the Blasket Islands who had cancer, and they were sleeping off out in the back of the island for 2 and 3 nights at a time. Now, I don't know why, and I don't recommend anybody else does it, but they had some belief that there was something in the Blasket Islands that was a healing force. That's what they talked about. So anyway, I wanted to bring people out there just because the Traubon is a gorgeous beach, and we could do some yoga, we could play some hurling, we could do some meditation. And I just thought, let's go out and do it. And I had seen a bunch of divers there who took the 3 houses that Billy, the great Blasket Island Ferries crowd, they run 3 houses there, and I was working with them, and one night all 3 houses were taken, the half doors were open, there was candles in the windows, there was music coming out, and I was like, oh, this is the way it used to be. I said, we could do this too, So when I met Siobhan, that was triggered. She was bringing the yoga, she was bringing a deep spirituality, she was bringing a ritual and a lot of real deep strength in her that I could feel from her. So I thought it'd be a good combination. I said, let's run a retreat out in the island. And we were a week out from that, and the boats were cancelled because of high tides. And then we found this retreat centre in Ballyferret, and we ran our first Wild Irish retreat there. And we ran maybe 10 more, I'd say, down there. Had another child, Eru, she's 4, Ishna's 7.
What's your name? Eru.
Eru.
How do you spell?
Ifada or Iufada.
Oh wow, lovely, yeah.
And Ishna was the first one.
Tell me Eru, what does Eru mean?
Well, Eru is where we get the era. Eru was there was the three goddesses of Ireland: Eru, Banava, and Fola. And I think it was like, was it Manannán or one of the takeovers came in, and I think the deal was that whoever was chosen, they could take her name as the name of the country, and Eru was the goddess chosen, and that was the name. Well, that's where we got it from.
And your other child's name?
Ishna, and then Tuireann is the Tuireann, and that's the sons of Tuireann is one of the old stories as well. They're all, there's misery and death in the end of them, but they're just gorgeous sounds that are in our.
They are.
They're in our palate. They really are.
Yeah, they are.
So we had the two of those there. We we lived in Ventry. We had a lovely community down there. We really enriched ourselves on the culture and the music and the language, and we were going to the Irish language classes on a Friday morning where there's jamming with the language, pulling in different languages. Like, no, this is the Mochaneelach, this is how you teach the language. It was just really jamming with it. Like, this is the origin of that word, it's the etymology of it. It comes from here, it comes from there. And there was a couple of fellas down there who could hold that level of conversation, and we were just like children in it, like learning so much, you know. And so we were bringing that. Then we weren't masters of the language by any stretch. I'm sure that they were even looking at what we were doing sometimes, saying, come on lads, you can't be running Irish language retreats, you don't know your arse from your elbow in terms of the language. But we didn't. I don't feel like we were ever doing that.
No.
What we were doing was we were instilling the potential for the falling in love with the language again, and that's what we were most effective at. Was showing, like, living it out in the wild. That's Sláwach. You don't need to know what it is in English. That's Sláwach. It's a seaweed. Now you have it. So you're picking the language up in a very informal way, you know. So much richness, and that was because of Siobhan's background. She was bringing in, as the feminine, I suppose, as the woman, like, she was really willing to intuit as much as she could of the language, and sometimes totally erroneous, and sometimes she just landed on absolute gold, and that's what we were doing, you know. And writing poetry, and like people who were just doing Irish for the first time in 20 years, writing beautiful poems, and they were like, oh wow, you can actually, it's doable, you know. So it was lovely. And then we started, I mean, we were raising a family, and in some respects Wild Irish Retreat took a little bit of a backseat. We kept going, kept engaging with people. We were still building our community all the time, but like the idea of Wild Irish Retreat was always that we would cultivate a community where the language had a chance to roam, and where a lot of our friends who would have native crafts, dry stone walling, deer tanning, you know, whatever those crafts were, that we were interested in maybe looking at some of those things and seeing what the primal aspects of them were, what we were always attracted to about them, or whatever. And Sweat Lodge is another part of it.
What's Sweat Lodge?
Sweat Lodge is that old sauna, a wild sauna. And if it's a wild sauna, it's a wild sauna. If you bring in an element of ritual into it, it becomes a sweat lodge. And that's where I would say you have 40 to 50% in the words of, is his name going, Out of Africa? Can't believe his name is going to come to me. A beautiful book by the Wisdom of Africa about a young fellow who was taken by the Belgians and brought to France, stolen as they were, young Africans, and he ended up in the Sorbonne and was totally educated, and he went back to his tribe, I think the Dagara, and he was going to sort out their superstitions, and within 6 months he was like, oh, actually all the superstitions I picked up were actually in the West. This is where it's at. And he spent his life then dedicated to ritual and how to cultivate the conditions that people would make, the psychological transitions that are needed to make in life to move from a young boy to a young man. You know, how you do that at 7, the age of reason, or at 12 there's another graduation, at 18, 19 there's another graduation, and we kind of mess those up by drink, drugs and sex maybe, or whatever it is, as opposed to, no, there's a deeper psychological transition. It must mean you step into your manhood, and that can be done in a kind of a cultivated but wild, an element of wildness to it. I don't mean a wildness and chaos. I mean 40 or 50% of it is controlled, and that leaves room enough for the spirit to come in and guide whatever needs to be guided. And I know that some of this might sound batshit crazy to people, but I can only say that I would thought it was too, until I saw the effects of it. And I saw the things that would change in my life, the graduations that would be made, you know, where things would line up again. It was off kilter, and all of a sudden I'm back online, and things are starting to be impacted. Like we were talking about the game earlier, things are starting to impact me again in the way that, oh yeah, I'm back on my journey, I'm back on the right track. I was gone astray there. I was in Dubai for a weekend running a men's retreat out in Dubai. It's simplification. These were fellas, C-suite, executive, millionaire fellas, you know. We had 2 tents. One tent for food, one tent for sleeping and doing the practices, and we had a fire. And over the road there was a kind of a coliseum place where we played a bit of hurling and did a bit of wrestling and whatever. Simplifying. The most power that...
I love the way you throw in that, a bit of hurling and a bit of wrestling.
Yeah, a bit of hurling, a bit of wrestling. But the reason is that like you can, and it happened all the time with Siobhan Weilers, we'd be making these grand plans. This is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to cultivate, this is how we're going to plan this is how we're going to execute it, whatever, you know. It was on the way back from the hurling match to the camp where the lads were just walking with the hurls over the shoulders. We were walking across the desert, we weren't quite sure where we were going, and I was delighted we didn't know where we were going, because I wanted them to feel that uncertainty of, are we going the right way or are we not? Oh, actually it doesn't matter, because what I'm doing now, it feels pretty perfect, and it's like when I was a boy again, and I can connect with that boy inside me. And I haven't connected with that boy inside me for a long time, because I've been on a mission to slay whatever dragon that I've put out in front of myself that is almost out of reach all the time. And these fellas were, you know, living full belt at the, you know, high performing, but like even talking about them, I feel, you know, the stress in my body, that like it was, they were so, some of them were so stressed and so under so much pressure to just provide and to keep the whole thing afloat, that they had lost touch with that young fella inside of themselves. And here we were walking through the desert, and they were just grinning. They weren't grinning, they were smiling ear to ear. They were happy. And to feel the innocence of that happiness, I think, is something that we undervalue. And so we complicate things looking for it. And I think it's actually in the simplification that you find it. And also
I've been lucky in my own life, and even luckier to realise it, because it's lucky to have it, but it's even luckier that you realise it. That, for example, the gift of my life, which I've been lucky enough to do, is the gift of playing. You talked to the word, you used the word play earlier on, and I did a little bit of research years ago into. I used to love watching. An anthropologist called Desmond Morris, who lives in Wicklow, and he's still I think he's 96.
Wow!
And he lives in Wicklow, and I believe he's still alive.
Have you ever got to see him?
I've tried to get him on my podcast, and it's difficult because he won't.
Well, you better just go. Have you just gone to his house?
Yeah, go down to him.
Just talk to him.
I think go down to him. Yeah. Anyway, he wrote a book called Man Watching, which grew up on a farm, and I was only about 10 or 11, and there was nothing else to do, and I used to be obsessed with this book, and his preoccupation with humans, and how humans were similar to animals, and how our ways of behaviour were so closely linked to animals, and how we desired to play the whole time, and that, you know, the best way of working for humans is to put them into a situation where they're playing. John Cleese was very interesting on this throughout his career as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Apart from being a great comedian, he used to do lectures in the genius of playing. Yeah, and that he used to go back to the Monty Pythons, and how one of the reasons they were successful and they did so well was they were able to play. Yeah, they were able to play free with each other, and unafraid of making mistakes. Yeah. This is the key thing. This is the key thing, which I'm sure you've built into your wilderness retreats. You have to be unafraid to be to make a fool of yourself.
You have to notice your fear and move past it. Yeah, I suppose it's there. Yeah, it's there. And do you put any stock on? Because I know, like, I would have a couple of friends who do one in particular who there's a kind of the archetypes, the four main archetypes, and one of them will be the jester, and the jester has this opportunity to reflect back to the port. That's
what I do.
Yeah. So you'd see it.
The idea of doing satire, the idea of doing comedy, is to hold a reflection up to, as it were, as Shakespeare said, to life. Hold a mirror, as it were, up to life. So it's to be, without being pompous about it. I don't seek to be an educator, but for me, the release and the beauty of it is in the play. Yeah, and people can see when you're having fun. People can see when you're playing, and they know it. Yeah, they know it a mile away. Yeah, and they know when you're in it.
And what do you find is the most common response to it?
Of
when you're in play in an environment maybe where there's not other
mutual. Well, when I'm in front of a live audience, it's mutual joy. Yeah, people are joying out. They're laughing. They're laughing ecstatically. They're laughing out of pure joy. That not only are they finding what you're doing funny, they're finding the joy of you enjoying it funny, but also they're finding the joy of other people enjoying themselves funny. I mean, I know a guy, I was doing the 3 Arena last Friday, and a guy said he watched another guy laughing from beginning to end, and he wasn't just laughing at me, he was laughing at the people around him laughing.
Yeah.
And to be a medium through which that happens is absolutely the gift of my life. Or to be on the radio and to get a message where you get a text message, and these happens a few times in your life, where you get a text message and you go, "Hi, I really enjoyed that. Just stopped at the traffic light and I was laughing. I looked across and the traffic and the guy next to me was laughing in the car and I knew we were laughing at the same thing. And it wasn't Morning Ireland."
Brilliant.
And so to bring that sense, to make two people laugh, to make two strangers laugh at the same time by something you did, is something that no money can buy and no career can ever replace. So it's bringing joy to people. So if you are
it's very nourishing, like it's very nourishing.
It's exactly nourishing is the word. And if you're a conduit in any way of doing that, then your gift is complete, you know. So, but anyway, it gets back to that thing of play, monkeys, chimps, and the kind of the chimp mind, and
there's a great theorist, social theorist, Huizinga is his name, and he wrote about sport. And one of the problems of the modern day is that sport used to be a tool of play. The play was always an integral part of it, and the great mistake that men make is they attribute serious things to jovial matters. Yeah. And hurling or sport at all has kind of gone down that what he would term the wrong road, in that they're treating something not jovial. It's not jovial. It has deep meaning, but it is also just play. Yeah,
it's only play.
Whereas we treated it, just he said that and he did this, and that score at the end, and they bet them.
Also, similarly with great inventions and great advances in science. So, for example, when people are, where a man or a woman or a group of men or a group of men and women make serious leapfrogging advances, it's not because they've been schooled, monitored, controlled, or horsewhipped. It's because that for a period of time they've been let at their own devices and they've gone down a completely different road, which maybe for a while looked as if, where are you going with this? And they've engaged subconsciously, basically, with unknowns to themselves in the act of play. So the wilderness retreats continue.
Well,
or they will continue.
They are.
At present, you're trying to raise funds for a new retreat. Is that right?
Yeah. No. We want to base ourselves. We can't be a family. We can't be a family and be running retreats like we Ilon Clare and different places. I mean, it's just too much. There's just too much movement, you know. So we've been looking for a place. Now we've been looking. When I say we've been looking with the wind. Like we've been just listening. Okay. There's an option there. Let's see what that's like. And we ended up in this beautiful place down in South Kilkenny, and there was an idea that I had.
That Ballyhale.
Yeah. And there was an idea. Now my father comes up to Ballyhale, and he's like, "How do you live up here? How do you live with these lads? You know,
I know, savages.
War,
I know.
And I really appreciate it about him too. But for me, what I've been looking for since I went to West Kerry, I found this quote from Brian Cox or somebody who said that home is the ideal set of conditions to thrive and survive. It's not Wexford and it's not Limerick and it's not whatever. It's like, it's just the conditions. And so we've been following that, and we got this option to take a house for a little while, and we began to kind of look at the house and realise, okay, there's a long shed there, good dining area, there's stables out the back, we convert them fairly handily with a couple of workshops and a few mahals into accommodation. Lovely meadow at the back overlooking the river, a couple of yurts back there, perfect as well. It's nice overlooking a wild pasture, and a barn that's a really good nick for gigs or for events or for workshops or whatever. So we want to base ourselves. The house part of it we kind of have. We have that part of it covered. We're crowdfunding now to try and get the beginning of the wild
give me an address. Give me an address.
Retreat centre.
Give me a place that people could go.
So if you go to wildirish.ie or diarmuidlyng.ie you'll see the link on there, and we are just trying to create a place where a community can build, where the language is alive, where the practices are alive, where people can come together and discuss, get together, plan, do whatever it is they need to do I kind of imagine to root ourselves going forward a little bit more.
Rather than be travelling around.
Yeah, I mean, root ourselves primarily for sure, but also for where people can come and we can maybe root ourselves a little bit more in practices that are, and in activities and ways of being together.
And send any hurlers who you think back to Wexford, not keep them in Limerick.
And if we can get lifts down to training field in Wexford for Ishna, that'd be great as well. But no, that's the mission, and that's been the mission from day one.
WildIrish.ie and DiarmuidLyng.ie.
Yeah, and there's a fundraiser link there.
Crowdfunding.
Yeah, and anybody who can help is what we're trying to do.
Crowdfunding is all about publicity, really.
It's about publicity, but I think it's also about mutual value creation. That's what we've kind of aimed to do. So I maybe it could be 50 or 60 grand worth of people who've come in with their skills, offerings, capabilities of any kind, and we essentially sell them to people. So that it's not, I don't want to be in a position of saying, oh, Mario, kind of putting the cap out. Like, I'm like, no, Mario, look, we've got these 10 things. I think you'd really enjoy this retreat. I think you'd really enjoy this video that you could do as an advertisement for your show, whatever. Yeah. We've compiled, we're trying to build relationships with people and create offerings where there's a mutual value created for everybody involved. And that's the essence of what we want that place to be anyway, is that it's built on relationships, and not something that you're kind of trying to mine.
I know.
Like, let's build. Let's build.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I'm going to look this evening. I'm going to look at WildIrish.ie and I'm going to look at DiarmuidLyng.ie. I'm going to investigate it all, because I think your whole offering is totally fascinating, and it's coming from quite clearly a place of genuineness. And honesty. And honesty. Remember, honesty on the pitch, honesty on the 45, honesty on the 65, honesty everywhere.
I went about it. I got plucked out and I went about it. I learned the hard lessons, so now I'm not heading off to Barbados. Like, I'm here to work.
Yeah.
I am really enjoying it.
Good.
It's such a nourishing experience,
Nourishing experience. I love that word, nourishing.
Yeah.
Dermot, listen, thank you very much for meeting and coming on the podcast, and it's been a pleasure meeting you, and listen, I'm going to look into it, and hopefully I'll spread the word.
Buika slap, Mario. Goodbye.
Okay.
My thanks to Diarmuid Lyng and coming in and telling me his fascinating life story. So far, on and on it goes. And of course, thanks to my great sponsor, deluxebathrooms.ie, Ireland's premium bathroom and tile retailer. Get down to Dundalk Retail Park and Little Island in Cork, or online at deluxebathrooms.ie. And don't forget, they're having an amazing Easter extravaganza sale now on, saving up to 65% off luxury bathrooms and premium tiles between now and April 27th. Get down there if you can. Okay, that's it for the Mario Rosenstock podcast for this week. You can reach me personally, mariorosenstock@gmail.com. I'll be back same time, same place next week. Take it handy.